There are places you just won't find on a map for tourists. They're not romanticized. They have streets, buildings, parks, all the bones of a community. But the life, that sound, it's just gone.
That's Simon.
And today we're looking at a very specific kind of ghost town, one that didn't fade away over decades. It just stopped. It collapsed instantly the moment one factory closed its doors.
This is a deep dive into an absolute extreme economic concentration. Our whole mission here is to analyze the precise mechanics of how a community, a whole way of life, can be erased by a single business decision.
A single signature.
Right. We're charting the timeline, looking for those quiet warnings, and really trying to grasp the devastating speed of it all, the domino effect.
So if you're someone who needs to understand things quickly but also deeply, the sequence of events it's absolutely critical here. We're going to focus on that moment the future vanished, that point where decades of reliance just met a terrifying lack of alternatives.
And our sources for this, they detail the whole chilling process. It's like a corporate audit meets a personal diary.
Yeah.
It's clinical, but also incredibly human.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The singular purpose that defined the town.
Right.
For decades, its entire reason for being was the factory. We're not talking about a town that just happened to have a big employer.
No, not at all. This was a place that was built by the factory and for the factory. Its identity wasn't, a river or some local culture.
It was a labor supply chain.
That is the crucial distinction. The sources show this dependency was total, almost, designed to be absolute. You look at the local economy and the factory, let's call it the Atlas Mill for clarity, it wasn't just the biggest employer.
It was the only employer.
It was the sole economic generator. It accounted for over 80% of the town's entire tax base.
80%. So the local government had no real independence.
None. When the Atlas Mill paid its wages, that money just circulated right back into the town. The mill bought the high school band uniforms. It paid the taxes that paved the streets. Its executives sat on every local board that mattered.
So the company's health and the town's health weren't just related.
They were mathematically identical, one and the same.
And that deep integration, it must have dictated the whole rhythm of life there. It wasn't just a 9-to-5 job people commuted to.
No, the factory's schedule was the town's schedule. The human element is fascinating. Shift changes determine traffic.
When the grocery store was busy.
Exactly. Payday, usually a Thursday, decided when the local pub, the Grinder it was called, would be full.
And family holidays.
Tied directly to the mill's annual maintenance shutdown, a 2-week period in July. Life was structured, predictable, and completely dependent on those gates opening every morning.
It sounds like any other path was just not considered. So what did that mean for, say, a young person growing up there?
Well, that's what's so chilling. The lack of career choice. It was a profound monoculture, economically and socially.
You worked at the mill or you got out?
That was it. The path was clear. You joined the Atlas Mill, you hoped for the same security your parents and grandparents had, or you left the region entirely. The mill offered security, sure, but the price for that security was this absolute, non-negotiable vulnerability for the entire town. There was no plan B.
And this is where the timeline takes such a sharp and frankly a confusing turn, because the first signs that something was wrong, they weren't loud.
No.
They weren't scandals. They were these quiet, bureaucratic decisions, the kind of thing made on a spreadsheet 1,000 miles away.
We can actually trace them. The sources reconstructed this timeline of subtle signals. And the initial decay was just completely undramatic. A slow strangulation.
How so?
For example, a non-core department like their specialized tool and die shop, it was downsized.
Right.
Went from 30 workers to 10. Then you see the maintenance budgets being systematically cut.
Small amounts, I imagine. 7 to 9% annually, but over a 3-year period. It adds up.
And that's something the average worker would feel, but maybe dismiss as just, tightening the belt.
Exactly. And the most immediate hit to the workers' pockets was when overtime disappeared. For so many families, that overtime wasn't bonus money.
It is a mortgage.
It was the mortgage or college tuition. And when that vanished, it was framed internally as a correction, for rising inventory costs, not as a sign that the ship was sinking.
But while management is using this vague corporate language, the people actually on the floor, the people with their hands on the machines,
Yeah.
they had to have noticed other things.
They absolutely did. You had the classic whisper network. The break room rumors, the sources get very specific here, which is compelling.
Like what?
Sudden closed-door meetings, executives flying in from corporate headquarters and leaving 4 hours later. No statements, no walking the floor.
Just in and out.
And that contrast between the local hands-on knowledge and the opaque corporate decision-making, it is just so stark.
Yeah.
What kind of specific things were they seeing that the executives were apparently missing or ignoring?
Well, real material evidence. The workers knew the mill was running on patched-up machinery that should have been retired years earlier. They knew that essential supplies, high-grade steel components, were taking longer and longer to arrive.
Because suppliers weren't getting paid on time.
Exactly. So the sense of creeping neglect was everywhere. But even then, people held on to this belief that the mill will always be here.
Because the alternative was unthinkable.
To even imagine it required a psychological leap they just couldn't afford to make.
Which brings us to this huge, unresolved question. Despite all these signs, the final decision, the actual process, it's a complete black box.
It is. The sources are meticulous about the consequences of the decision, but they are almost totally silent on the executive rationale. Was it global commodity prices? Was it a plan to move production overseas? We just don't know the quantifiable why. We only know the outcome.
And then the critical moment.
Yeah.
The announcement itself, which is shocking for how undramatic it was.
Right.
No chaos, no immediate protests in the streets.
The sources describe a very brief, very controlled employee meeting. A small stage, a microphone, and an executive flown in to read a prepared statement.
Just a few sentences.
A few sentences stating the immediate end of operations. The final closure date was set for 6 weeks out. It was a clinical decision delivered clinically. And just like that, thousands of jobs, an entire way of life, voided.
And the personal toll of that. It wasn't just a layoff. It was an erasure of identity.
Think about the commitment. You're talking about people who spent 30, 40 years, their entire adult lives, with the same routine.
Same gate, same locker, same shift.
That routine was their identity. And to be told that, effective immediately, all of it was being liquidated. It left this profound existential vacuum. Nothing.
The psychological shock, the sheer speed of it, decades of stability just gone.
It must have been immense. When those Atlas mill gates shut for the last time on a Friday afternoon, the town didn't. It didn't erupt. The research suggests a stillness. A profound quiet descended.
It went from a noisy industrial community to
a landscape of sudden, heavy silence. The energy was just sucked out of the town all at once, replaced by this overwhelming collective numbness.
And that economic damage, it started before the dust even settled. The dominoes started falling almost immediately.
By Monday morning, the cascade had already begun. There was a small, family-run cafe right across from the main entrance, the Cornerstone Diner.
And it lost its breakfast rush.
It lost its 5:30 a.m. breakfast rush, which was 60% of its daily revenue. Gone. The owner had to close down 2 weeks later.
And that wasn't an isolated case.
No, far from it. The corner shop stopped ordering fresh food because its customer base just evaporated overnight. The pub, the Grinder, it cut its entire day staff by the following Tuesday. The shift change business was gone.
The speed is what's so brutal. This wasn't a slow recession.
It was a complete systemic failure compressed into just a few months.
So let's track that collapse over those next few months.
It moved through the secondary and tertiary economies very quickly. The local credit union held most of the mortgages for the factory workers.
So they faced immediate insolvency.
As soon as the loan default spiked. And within 4 months, the hardware store, the auto parts supplier, the 2 small doctors' offices, they all followed each other into closure. Like falling pins.
And the housing market, the anchor of any community.
It didn't drop, it collapsed.
Yeah.
Major banks immediately deemed the town unmortgageable.
So your equity was just gone.
Wiped out overnight. It trapped people. You're suddenly underwater on a worthless house with no job prospects anywhere nearby. Schools merged, then they shut down entirely.
Which forced an exodus.
An unavoidable one.
Yeah.
People didn't leave because they wanted to change. They left because there was, as the sources state, simply nothing left to stay for. Nothing to sustain life.
But some people couldn't leave.
And that's the most tragic part of the story. The elderly, people trapped by those worthless mortgages. They stayed. And they just had to watch as the community hollowed out around them, house by house.
Which brings us to today. If you were to visit this place now, the scene is just paused, frozen.
The factory itself is still standing. Broken windows, rust, peeling paint, but it's the eerie details that are so haunting. The sources describe machinery that's just frozen mid-task.
Waiting for a worker who never came back.
Exactly. An open logbook on a desk, maybe, showing the last production numbers?
It's the artifacts of an interrupted life.
Yes. Empty houses with the dining tables still set. Posters on bulletin boards for a community fair that never happened, a school play that was never performed.
The baseball field.
Untouched. The key thing to understand is that the town wasn't destroyed by a fire or a flood. It was just abandoned, quietly, as if everyone just agreed all at once to stop pretending.
And when we search for why, for some kind of understanding, the sources offer these competing narratives, explanations that try to make sense of it all, but they don't offer much comfort.
You hear three main arguments. The first is that the company was doomed anyway. Bad management, outdated product.
An internal failure.
Right. The second is structural, that the town should have diversified its economy years ago.
The ticking time bomb argument.
Precisely. And the third blames global markets, external pressures beyond anyone's control. But the sharpest accusation, the one you feel most acutely in the material, is aimed at the executives.
People who were completely detached from the community they were about to destroy.
That physical and social distance is seen as the catalyst. It was a balance sheet decision made without ever having to look the social cost in the eye.
Exactly. When a town's entire existence is built around that single promise, the job and that promise is just taken away with one signature. Those big explanations about global markets, they don't change the facts on the ground. The future just vanished. This town wasn't erased by war or disaster or by time. It was erased by a business decision. One signature, one short meeting, one factory gate locking for the last time.
And this brings us right back to today. Because this story, it isn't just history, it's a warning. Somewhere out there right now, other towns are betting everything on a single employer.
Hoping their story ends differently.
Right. This vulnerability, this extreme economic concentration, it's still a reality for millions of people.
So this deep dive, it concludes, but the most important questions, the ones about accountability and process, they're still just hanging there, unanswered.
Which leaves an important question for you, the listener, to carry forward. What was the final decision matrix? The last piece of data that led to that one signature?
What line on the balance sheet finally tipped the scale?
Exactly. And were there internal forecasts that predicted this? That accurately showed the swift and total social destruction of the community?
Oh.
And if they existed, were any other actions even considered? And maybe the most pressing question of all, how many communities today are completely unaware that their entire future rests on the whim of a handful of people, hundreds or thousands of miles away? That, for you, is the enduring, unresolved question left by this quiet erasure.